Hi, I'm Steve Freed, and I'm here today talking with Jim Tiller about his new book, Adaptive Security Management Architecture. Jim, tell us a little bit about the book. Why did you write it?
I wrote it because I think that everybody talks about security being aligned with the business. There's a lot of that. You talk about governance, risk, and compliance. You see a lot about people saying you got to get more aligned to the business about what you're doing for security. But I kind of get this feeling we're still applying 20th century philosophies to a 21st century business world. And I see a tipping point for security. It's identity in the business coming up very quickly. And so I decided to take a lot of what's already out there in history and try to pull it together and interconnect it in a new way so that security can be more adaptive, more flexible, and in doing so, be able to respond to business in terms that they understand as well as security can understand. So it's guidance on how to I believe the industry needs some guidance on how to plug all these different things that we're doing together, specifically targeted at having a meaningful identity and relationship with the business. So that's why I wrote it. I wanted to get security closer to the business.
Okay, you talked about still applying 20th century techniques. What do you think has been holding us back the most? What is it that we're just failing to do?
I think in some ways security are trying to get the business to learn about security. And I don't see security people willing to take the leap to learn about the business and understand their challenges, understand the risks, that how they interpret them. And I think a lot of security organizations and enterprises are not operating as a business unit. They're not thinking in the forms of how is my investment being applied as far as KPIs relative to the business goals. You hear a lot about that, but not the really underpinning framework to facilitate that from the grassroots all the way through to the boardroom. And one of the things I say in the book that is probably going to be a little bit controversial is I say risk management doesn't need to be the front and center. Security people go to the business and say, here's the risk and here's why. Make a decision. And we try to tell them what threats are. We try to tell them what vulnerabilities are and what it means. And we don't give them an option. We don't blend that communication very well. And so I take a completely different approach to, instead of using risk management as the primary interface to the business, I use a completely different approach. The second thing, if I may, is we take a lot of measurements. We try to do KPIs, we try to do any type of metrics around security, how many viruses we may have stopped or something. But what I found systemic is the inability to influence the environment that you're taking measurements from. It's like measuring the weather. So I found what happened was, over years of thinking about this and kind of writing at it and finally came together to get it done, is I realized I can kill two birds with one stone. Is by connecting this architecture together and creating a more business-aligned, business-enabling, adaptive framework for how you function as a security entity. It also created the mechanisms by which, when you measure something, you can actually influence how the program is functioning to really change your metrics. So I've seen a number of scenarios where it's moving up and to the right, and then all of a sudden it goes down. As in bad, it's going to go good now, number of vulnerabilities or something. And I asked the CISO, I go, well, how are you going to make that happen? How are you going to make that hockey stick go in the direction you want it to go? And you'd be surprised. A lot of them go, well, they'll tell you the plan, but you go back 3-4 months later, and that hockey stick never happened because they don't have it deeply ingrained into the system. And so those are the two major points where I felt that there were some gaps, so I started writing about that.
Okay. As you were doing your research, were you able to find organizations that truly were adaptive, that were able to do it right and show a difference?
Pockets of it. For example, some financial organizations, they'll create groups that provide security services to the business units, right? So maybe vulnerability testing or risk assessment services or identity management services or something of that nature. And when you see these compartmentalized like that, under good management, you see that they can really adjust quickly, and they've created a technical infrastructure to allow them to do that. So in watching these organizations do this, not just financials, other ones, manufacturing and so forth, but watching them do that, I'm like, hey, it would be great if you could really explore that on how security manifests itself entirely to the business. And that was really kind of the impetus for the book. That happened back in, my first exposure to that was back in 2001, and I was working with a company to help develop a framework. And then I watched it come to fruition. I was like, well, that's interesting. Now, if we can just expand on that, but it's pretty rare. It's pretty rare.
No, I know it's a good long book and there's a lot of great information, but if you could distill it down to the single best takeaway that you would give as advice to somebody trying to create this environment, what would it be?
It takes tenacity. It's not a rip and replace architecture. What I want people to understand is that when they read it, you don't have to have a 50-person security team or 100 or 800 or, you can do this with a small group. So don't be intimidated by all the moving parts that I express in the book. The values, I call it the interconnects, right? Because I talk about governance, risk, and compliance, and capability, maturity, and services management under the concept of this bonding them together in a new way and re-identifying them a little bit. So I think in some ways it can be a little intimidating. You're like, where's Jim going with this? It's going to take 100 years to do it. It's going to take 100 people to do it, which actually quite the opposite. It's more of a mindset. And I think really the core message I want to get out is there's a great deal of sophistication in what security professionals do today that is absolutely untapped. And that's, for me, that is really hard to watch when I see brilliant people kind of tucked into an envelope of control processes within a business, and they're doing fantastically amazing things transactionally in the trenches. So what I do is I share these, what I call the 4 major theories, and I express these theories, and I say, now let's apply them to the whole thing. And that's where, as a reader, you got to take that leap of faith with me and get past that, but realize when you get through it, you can do it with a small group of people. So it's fairly scalable. So it works with large organizations, it can work with very small organizations. But get through the book, read it as a story, if you will, and then internalize it and then apply it. But it takes time, and you need to demonstrate value to the business as you do it, because you can't build it overnight, obviously. It does take some shifting in theories and some of the core security philosophies that may be existing in your business, but it's not insurmountable by any stretch of imagination.
Okay, great. And when's it due out?
It should be out September, I think, later this year. I actually just finished it and submitted it to my publisher. So hopefully we'll get it edited and get it out pretty soon. I want to have it out this year.
Okay, great. Can't wait for it. Okay, we've been talking with Jim Tiller, the author of Adaptive Security Management Architecture, and good luck.
Thank you very much.